Let's say you've been married for a while. You and your spouse find yourself in that stay-at-home, watch TV with the kids kind of rut. You'd love a change in the routine to make a reconnection with your spouse, but making the effort to liven things up is one of the many, many things on your list to do. Well, my guests today are here to help you with a jumpstart spark for your relationship. Fran and Bill Lytle are consumer behaviorists. They are in the business of sharing gender-specific insight into people's behaviors. Welcome, Fran. Welcome, Bill. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, you're welcome. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, what if we wanted to jumpstart our dating in our relationship? What are some steps that we could do? How could we? Is it a realistic expectation to even try and do that?
It's definitely a realistic expectation, and you know, in anybody's marriage, they go through 4 different stages. Your first stage is very passionate, and after a while, you can't sustain that same passion for a long period of time, so you go to a stage of intimacy, where you share common jokes and common goals and common secrets, and you kind of nudge one another under the table when you go to your mom's house for Thanksgiving. Then after a while, you'll go through a stage of nostalgia. Typically, this is when you bring things from your birth home into your own home. And that whole movie, Chevy Chase's Christmas Vacation, do you remember that? He wanted to have that Christmas that he had at home.
That he had when he was a kid.
Right, and bring it home to his family. And then finally, you'll go through a stage that's called partnership, which is when you really do everything together, things you probably wouldn't have done with your spouse when you're younger, like you go to the supermarket together, you'll go to the bank together. I mean, you really are truly together as partners. So as you go through these different stages, you want to be able to bounce back to that passion stage every once in a while, which is the first stage, because that was your original, that was your first. It helps you remember your first kiss, your first hug, and how it felt was so special.
And so that's what dating is going to help us do, try and bounce back to that passion stage.
Absolutely.
Well, you know, when couples typically go out, though, the problem is that, you know, it's a movie, or they can't even make up a decision, or they're going to the same restaurant time after time and things like that. I mean, what can couples do that add variety and bring that passion back in?
There are 3 different, I would say 2 or 3 different types of activities. It can be a cultural trip to a museum, it could be a fun activity, or it could be just plain entertainment. So if you understand that there are 3 or 4 different types of occasions, pick the one that you would like to share with your spouse.
Okay. And sorry?
I think what happens sometimes is that people get very disappointed because someone has very high expectations about what
that's what I was going to say. I mean, what are the best things to consider when you're planning the date? I mean, does one person plan the date and present it to the other person? Should you plan it together? What are considerations?
Typically, it's the woman who's going to go ahead and take the initiative, because the women, we make decisions, 80% of the household decisions about everything anyway. But what we'll do is we'll narrow down the choices and then bring it to our spouse and say, here are some ideas that I've been considering. What do you think about this? And the important part of dating is people put so much expectation on the experience, and really the anticipation phase should be just as much fun. And if you take time in that anticipation phase and share things with your spouse, you think you might want to go here, you have some photographs, you downloaded some things from the web, you heard some people talk about it, and you have that discussion, then that you have that experience, it's very unlikely that one of you will be disappointed. But then afterwards, you really have a recollection phase. So dating is about 3 phases: anticipation, the experience, and the recollection. Now, men are not very good in the anticipation stage and the recollection stage.
Now, you say that based on research that's been done, things that you have both discovered in your line of work?
It's true. Sometimes, particularly for men, they put such an emphasis on the experience itself that we could actually learn a language and planning for it. If you spend time planning for it and then talk about it afterwards, if it doesn't turn out the way you want to, it could actually be funny, and you recall it, or you talk about it as being a really bad time or a really funny time, or something didn't turn out the way it should. But if you put too much pressure on yourself that the date has to be perfect, chances are it's not going to be. So have fun. It's almost like a language. Remember, you go back to when you were first using the language of dating, when you first met your wife or your husband, and try to remember how you did that. And when you ask for a date, don't ask necessarily for a date, but ask for time together. Because it is really, it's about a language.
And you ask, is that based upon research? It really is, because women, we use our brain differently than men do. We use both sides of our brain at the same time. It makes us really good at multitasking. And men only use one side of their brain at a time, which makes them incredibly good at focusing. So the fact that we can multitask so well gives us that ability to do the anticipation phase. And women's highest personal value is establishing and nurturing relationships. So after a date, I'm more likely to tell my sister about it, my girlfriend about it, my friends at work, and oh, if I get flowers, it's like, I don't care that the flowers are for me, I have to put them prominently so that everyone can see it. It's really important for us because we're not just nurturing relationships with our husband, it helps us to connect better with our girlfriends too.
And I guess it's helpful if men understand that, that we have that afterglow and then wanting to just draw it out and remember it and reminisce about it.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if we can take credit for it, because then that makes us very, very
That's
kind
a
of
bonus.
successful. That's a bonus, and we like that. We like that competition. We like to be able to figure out, did we come up with the perfect date? Did we come up with something that she really, really liked? Because then that makes it more successful for us, and we like that achievement.
And what's interesting is what you're saying, that the perfect date doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the perfect event and exactly what was anticipated, but it's those stages of looking forward to it and then having it and then looking back on it and then planning the next event that's going to happen. And some of that planning ahead can ensure that both of you are
That's a great idea, because if you actually, instead of planning one date, if you plan a series of dates or types of activities, for instance, there are things that I like to do more than what Fran would like to do, but if we can plan a series of dates,
of what?
well, I wouldn't, 89.9%. But there are things clearly that I like to do that, start with the word sports. However, they may not be Fran's favorite, but we can trade off. But if we know that there's a series of dates, all of a sudden, now we can kind of accommodate each other so that we can do things. And I'll be glad to go, to a Hugh Grant movie if I have to. As long as we go to a sports bar afterwards.
All right.
So it's a trade-off. So and each one is funny, because I'm going to clearly have funny stories about Hugh Grant, and she's going to make fun of the guys at the sports bar.
There you go.
So afterwards, in the recollection, we will have plenty of stories to tell about our night out.
Sure.
So I know we only have 1 minute left, but I guess my next question would be, how often is the ideal frequency for date nights?
You really, really should make a point of doing it at least once a month. You really should. If you can get more than that, but I believe that's probably unrealistic because we're so busy with our work and with our children and our family and everything that's going on.
Finding the babysitter.
And find the babysitter. But there are find other couples like yourself, and maybe you can trade off babysitting.
That's what we recommend.
One night you take their kids in, and another night they take your kids in. So babysitting. Don't look for the barriers.
Idea.
Don't look for the barriers. Look for the opportunities.
That's a great idea.
And don't think about why you can't go on a date, but think about not only why we can go on a date, but how much fun we would have. Because remember, it was really fun in the very beginning. It was one of the best times of your life. So why not try to recreate that?
Thank you, Bill.
I think that would be fun.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Fran. And
You're welcome.
That's fabulous. Now, Bill and Fran, you wrote an excellent book, Connection Moments, The Couple. And that is, again, by Fran and Bill Lytle, and you can find that in the bookstores. Thanks so much for being here.